Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host Michael Howard, the Head of Marketing at Infotools. Today we're joined by Alysse Henkel, Vice President of Research at the Vision Council, a leading association for the optical industry, focusing on enabling better vision for better lives. Alysse has spent much of her career working in the nonprofit sector, first for program evaluation and then moving into market research. An interesting transition. She has worked with organizations such as Goodwill, AARP in the past, as well as serving as a strategic data fellow at the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University. Very impressive. Welcome to the show, Alysse.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. So what's the most significant thing you're going to share with us today?
Well, I would love to touch on a couple of things today, mostly related to kind of transition and change management. So be happy to talk about sort of lessons learning that I've learned from transitioning into market research from my previous program evaluation role. As well as, what it's like and some challenges that researchers may face when they're, encountering new systems and methods that need to be updated, as well as give your audience a little bit of information about sort of what market research looks like at trade associations like mine.
Very cool. Looking forward to the discussion. So let's start out with talking a bit about your background and your transition into market research. I recently saw a study from the MRII that said a significant number of people who are working in market research didn't plan on it for their career path. And this is also reflected with a lot of things that people have said across the podcast that I've done as well. So can you tell us a bit about how you ended up in this role?
Sure. So like you said before, I've kind of spent my career in the nonprofit world. And I always did have an intention to work on the research side of things. So that's been sort of consistent for me throughout my career. But the world, as I've been learning, of program evaluation and market research, while they very much do the same things, the work is very similar. The sort of names they use for the kind of work that they do and the methods that they use can be really different. So that's something that's been really interesting to me so I've been in this market research role for the last 3 years at the Vision Council. And before that, I've spent 15 years or so sort of working in the nonprofit world, evaluating programs. So that means I was sort of looking at like, how is a social service program effective? Sort of analyzing the program structure and the results of the program, and pretty similar work to what's going on in the market research world, where we're evaluating the effectiveness of products or campaigns and things like that. It's kind of just a different subject area, but pretty distinct fields, although I think there's sort of a lot of room for more overlap between the two worlds. So program evaluation and market researchers do pretty similar things day to day: surveys and interviews and focus groups, analyzing data, but they sort of keep to themselves, is what I've learned. And there's not a lot of crossover sort of between program evaluation and market research. So it was a pretty simple transition for me in terms of the day-to-day work that I do, but I've really had to learn over the last few years sort of a new lingo for talking about the kind of work that I'm doing, especially when I'm talking to other market researchers. So I may still be saying some things wrong because, still learning every day.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so working in the not-for-profit sector can be very different from working in the commercial, the for-profit sector. Have you come across any examples where things that people say that are best practice in the commercial world just aren't quite fit for purpose in the work that you're doing, that you've had to maybe adjust and tweak?
Yeah, so I think that some of the things that I've had to adjust sort of working in the sort of the more like the commercial space has been really focused like to put the results or outcomes sort of upfront. So in the nonprofit world, when your audience for these kind of research results is often like funders of programs, whether they're government or private funders, you're really trying to talk about sort of how rigorous the work was and how much, care and effort was put into evaluating the program so that you're sort of building a lot of trust in your results. And what I've learned really in the commercial sector is people certainly do care about like the rigor that's involved in a study or research. But really what you want to lead with is sort of the results. So what did you learn from the research? And then you can sort of supplement it with details about methodology or what have you for those who want to get into the weeds, but that you really need to lead with like what you learned, what were the big takeaways that I think that people in the commercial side of things are leaning much towards rather than sort of wanting to learn more detail about the methods.
Very interesting. So since you've had I guess a toe in both worlds, what do you think program evaluators could learn from market researchers, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think because the work is so similar, I think just generally best practices for survey research or focus group research are very consistent sort of across both fields, and likely, having maybe joint conferences or something like that would make a lot of sense for us to learn more broadly from each other. But something that I've seen really that sort of the nonprofit folks, they can be sometimes a little bit more academically minded, like I talked about before, sort of really talking about the methodology or the rigor, that they could probably learn from market researchers about sort of better ways to kind of package their research and insights that they're gaining from the work to just really pull out the highlights. Because no one really wants to read a 50-page program evaluation report, but that was very common in the kind of work that I used to do before, versus like to have a, maybe a 10-slide deck that sort of hits the highlights, is much more palatable for most audiences. On the other side, I think that market researchers could maybe take some pointers from program evaluators around sort of centering the needs of research participants. So often when you're doing program evaluation, you're working in many cases like with vulnerable populations, so people who are recipients of social services, and so a lot of care and attention is paid to sort of their experience in the research themselves. Making sure that the language we're using is appropriate and sensitive to their context, that we're using the right kind of grade level of language, as well as sort of making it relevant, culturally relevant to their community, and things like that. So I think in sort of paying more attention to the actual participant experience, probably there could be more work done on the market research side of things, especially when you're working with sort of really niche groups, to make sure you're testing out the language and the type of survey to make sure it's like fitting the context really well.
That's also something that comes loud and clear across in a lot of the other discussions that I have, like putting respondents or participants at the center and truly I guess respecting them, isn't it? Because they're giving up their time to help you with what you're trying to achieve. And in turn, if you treat them better, you get better data, I guess, to be able to make better decisions and then improve the experience for them from the what they're actually doing in the like the medical or whatnot world.
Yeah, that's right. I think that, having the participant experience centered makes a lot of sense across the board, for data quality, but also just making sure that you're sort of recognizing sort of the human experience in all of this.
And then it also has a broader market research benefit from it as well, because if you treat them well and they have a good experience with you, they're more likely to take part in future studies with other people as well. So we lift the whole industry by doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
So you also mentioned that you had to overhaul some systems and methods when you started in your role. I believe this is common for other insights professionals right now, as the landscape is changing so fast with new technology, for example. What was your experience?
Yeah, I do think that this is not a unique experience, but part of the reason I was brought on into the role that I have now is because in some of the nonprofit work that I'd done, I'd also helped sort of modernize our data systems as well. And so that was a little bit of the challenge coming into my role here at the Vision Council. So when I came in 2021, they had been doing really a lot of survey research. When I came in, we had a tracker survey that reached 10,000 consumers each month. So we had a lot of data, but very scarily, the data was all stored just like in Excel files on one of my colleagues' desktop, like on his computer. And so that made me very nervous for a variety of reasons. Both like Excel is not a great way to just store data over time, since it can be sort of easily and accidentally changed, as well as, storing anything, including, hundreds and hundreds hundreds of thousands of survey responses on a desktop is a terrible idea. That a lot of investment goes into that data. So that's sort of the kind of atmosphere that I was walking into, like pretty rudimentary in terms of data storage, data analysis. And so what I did is really like set up new data systems, data storage. We sort of set up new protocols for data analysis and data governance. Now we have every piece of data that we have is stored 3 different places just in case one of them fails. And so I think sort of building that infrastructure and systems was important to sort of lay the groundwork about data storage and usage, but then next to work on data quality and data and like improving the data analysis and reporting that we were doing as well. I think things had just gotten kind of stuck in time. So this survey program that I inherited started about a little over 20 years ago. And so that's when, and then over time this big tracker survey had just been sort of bolted on over time, but not very much was taken away from it. And it also wasn't sort of critically looked at as like, is this still the right information to be tracking over time? And so another big project was sort of revamping that survey instrument as well.
Mm. Can you think of any examples of value that you're able to get, I guess, retrospectively after putting this in, analyzing some of that older data?
Yeah, so it's been tricky to effectively use and store the older data. But we have found so what we did when we tried to sort of build a new revamped or refreshed survey on top of it, we tried to really hone in on some of the most important questions that survey was asking in its previous iteration, in order to use the language as closely as possible in the future survey, so that we were able to trend things back, past, because when you're making that change, it's tough that you're not able to trend that data over time. And so what we did was just we were able to sort of isolate, maybe it's 10 questions or so of that original survey, to try to bring that language forward as much as possible, so we could have something to trend against over time, because that was important for the folks we were reporting to.
Absolutely. Well done on that. It sounds like a very big project, but well worth doing indeed. So at Infotools, we're big proponents of updating outdated processes, so which you've kind of done here. We just published a paper on updating tracker studies to keep them up with the evolving consumer landscape. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about some of the details on what exactly changed and how you changed it. You touched a little bit about it just then. Many people are worried about disrupting historical data, and it isn't an easy task to change something like this, is it?
Yeah, it was definitely tough, and really it's just like kind of a big change management project. So not only is it hard to sort of make the changes to the actual survey itself and that sort of thing, but also for your audience to make sure they're understanding why you're making the changes, and that sort of some short-term pain of not being able to trend everything like you had in the past is worthwhile for sort of the long-term gains that you can get out of higher quality data with sort of better questions and sort of better folks taking the survey. So some of the changes that we made, like I said before, like we tried to hone in on just a few of the questions that we could sort of keep essentially in their current form. So we had a few things to trend over time, really important things, because we're doing research about people's US consumers, their habits related to eyewear and eye care. So going for exams or buying glasses, things like that. So the really important questions about like, what did you buy? When did you buy it? When did you have an exam? Trying to keep that sort of thing as consistent as possible. One of the things we did to sort of make the case for changing some of the survey itself was I did some cognitive interviewing. And so that's sort of taking from my kind of program evaluation roots, where we would sort of really kind of like workshop a survey, the language with participants before we would actually roll it out to the broader population. So I went through a survey in sort of its current form, which is really long, like over 300 questions in this tracker survey. Not everyone got them, but it was a ridiculously long survey. And so testing things that, like, as a person new to the optical industry, that I didn't understand those terms before I joined, we're using some of that jargon in the survey itself. So I chose, to highlight some of those questions that I thought were particularly problematic and ask consumers in cognitive interviewing, like, okay, so read this question to me and like, how do you interpret it? What does it mean to you? And then talk me through out loud how you would answer the question. And so that was really helpful to understand and to then make the case to people who didn't want to change the survey, to say like, hey, people are misinterpreting the language that we're using in this survey, like a change is needed here. So that was helpful to sort of be able to point to that data. People don't know like very much about what's in the lens of their glasses. Like we can't ask the detailed questions that the lens manufacturers want us to ask of consumers because they just don't know. People just think like, oh, well, they don't know all the details about the lenses as an example. Another thing that we used was like as an example was that in the industry, we call sunglasses without a prescription Plano sunglasses, but I'd never heard that term before joining the Vision Council, but we were using it in the survey to mean non-prescription sunglasses, but the general public doesn't know things like that. So that was sort of like, so doing that testing and then making the case that we should change the survey is sort of important to us. And then we were able to sort of make big changes to the survey and also hold really strong on having like a 5-minute survey that we would use as a tracker instead of a 15 or whatever, how long the survey would be before. So sort of made some big changes, holding a few things steady, but overall kind of overhauling and refreshing the survey.
How many intermissions do you think would have taken with the 300 questions survey?
Yeah, I don't know. It was a really long, complicated survey before. So I try to just like kind of block that out and not think about the data quality we were seeing before. Because the other thing we did was really like look at the data, like did an audit of the past recipients, and they're throwing out like a number of respondents each month because of poor data quality. And it's just not really surprising because that is an incredibly long survey to really stick it out to the end.
And full kudos to those that did.
Yeah, seriously.
I imagine working in insights in a not-profit organization differs quite a bit from working at a brand or agency. Can you tell us a bit more about doing market research at the trade organization association?
Sure. So, my trade association might work a little bit differently than some others do, but I would say that sort of what's a little bit unique about kind of research that goes on at a trade association is that we often sort of have a hand both in more of the like economic research as well as the sort of consumer brand industry tracking kind of research. So my team does both economic data analysis and research related to, so if you hear, something about like the market size or how much, consumers spend on eyeglasses or eye care, eye exams, that likely comes from my team where we do an annual estimate around, so I think last year we said something like $67 billion was sort of the size of the optical market in the US. And so we'll do those kind of more economic research, and trade associations are often sort of a source for that kind of information. But then on the other hand, we also do kind of the more traditional market research. So doing research with consumers to understand about how they use products for eyewear and eye care, or what kind of services they get, their satisfaction with things like their vision insurance and things like that. So as a trade association, we're kind of uniquely positioned to get an overview of the whole market. Instead of just focusing on like one brand or one product, we're doing sort of pretty extensive research across the whole industry. Sometimes we do the research with, consumers or patients, but we'll also do research with people who work in eye doctor offices in the US too, as well as trying to sort of get their perspective. So and we publish reports for our members. So members of our trade association are anyone sort of involved in the optical industry. So we have a lot of people who work sort of on the more on the manufacturing side of things. And then also people who sort of interact with consumers on the retail side. So we're sort of trying to develop research that fits the whole supply chain of the optical industry.
It'd be interesting to hear about some of the studies you may have done or the industry's done on the impact of technology and devices on the vision of society.
Yeah, I think some of the like really interesting research that we've done has been around, we've done some research about smart eyewear. About how people are using smart eyewear, which is a really small share of the market right now, but that's where, sort of like if there's a speaker or a microphone, or in some cases a camera or AI built into glasses frames, there's a lot of sort of interesting, innovative products in that category. And while most people haven't used them, there's actually a lot of interest from consumers in new products like those. So I think we're really seeing the early adopters take advantage of that kind of new technology around smart eyewear, but imagine that will sort of proliferate a little bit more widely over the coming years that we've seen sort of on that smart eyewear front. But there's a lot of change in the industry and sort of in the consumer products that people are accessing.
Absolutely. And the technology is helping us to even frames like yours almost to the stage where smart eyewear is getting to that size as well. So it's really fascinating to see where it's going. So thinking about market research is better when we have more diverse perspectives and views, etc., coming in. So sometimes that means research partners as well. Do you use them? Do you have specific qualities or skills that you're wanting when you're seeking a partner or agency?
Yeah, so we do use a variety of different kind of partners. typically we're trying to sort of bring most of our research in-house with our own team, but we certainly outsource for like finding a survey sample provider, for instance, to help us sort of reach sometimes like a general population, but also like sometimes we'll need a very niche population as well for some of the research that we do. So I think some of the things we look for in those kind of partners are someone who can like easily integrate into our own survey system. So in the past we've used Decipher, or currently we're using Qualtrics. So finding someone that can like sort of really work with us easily to integrate their sample into our framework. As well as sort of, like I talked before, data quality is super important to us in the survey sample. So when we're looking at providers there, we're looking for folks who have really robust data quality checks and then sort of have a lot of kind of guarantee about the quality of their data. So that way, if we need to do an audit, that they're sort of happy to sort of take our feedback about the data quality as well. I'd say the other sort of my pet peeve around providers is for getting a quote for a sample is I often just don't have time to take a phone call. So I really appreciate when the sample providers can provide a quote via email or via some sort of online platform versus sort of requiring a phone call to make that happen. So that's my sort of little pet peeve in working with some providers. But overall, like when we're generally outsourcing like a full project, if we'll need to connect with like a full service agency or partner on a project, that something that's really important to me and my team is around high quality data visualization and reporting. So we've also worked really hard over the last few years to kind of set a standard for what our reports, the look and feel of our reports, to make sure that it's been really consistent and high quality. And so I had one provider tell me like, no one is going to be able to meet your expectations related to data visualization. So I am no longer working with him. So that's also something that's important. And, we certainly, other people can meet our data visualization expectations. So that's something that's also just really important to me, that they follow our brand guidelines, but also kind of just understand the look and feel of the reports that we develop.
No, absolutely. And I mean, those reports are going out to the so many different industry partners and players and businesses, aren't they? So it's got to be on brand and it's got to look good and easy to understand as well. So not just look pretty, but also show something that's meaningful. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important to me in data visualization. I don't care like how fancy the data viz is, as long as it is really clear and that someone can easily take away the point. That's like what's really important to us. Yeah.
Is just on that, is interactivity important at that level as well, or are you more just focused on being able to showcase that and share the insights?
Yeah, so we don't right now have any interactive reports that we're developing for our member, although I think we're a little behind the times, and I've been trying to move in that direction for a while. But when I came on the scene, what the reporting was like a PDF print of Excel tables. So we're sort of starting with, that's the framework that people are used to getting data from us. And so now typically we're presenting the reports in like graphical form that are static right now. And so trying to sort of move into the space of, especially because we have a number of like quarterly reports that we publish, some annual, to try to put that into more of a dashboard format for our members. But that's been a little bit, there's not the demand for that right now, but I think from our really data savvy users that, they'll be able to adopt that sort of thing easily and really appreciate it. But we do have some sort of old school folks who are dealing with too. So right now we've been kind of making some baby steps into the interactivity, but reports are static right now.
Yeah, Well, I was talking with my boss who's been in market research for quite a while now, and he was talking about the old dot matrix printers where you would all the perforated things and just flicking through the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started at Goodwill a while ago, we were still sending out what we called our annual statistical report. We were sending in the mail a copy of, essentially printed out Excel table to everyone to view the report. So yeah, things have come a long way.
That's right. So we always like to ask our guests to look into the crystal ball and let us know what the future in their space might look like. So how about with yours, Vision Counsel, not-for-profit association market research?
Generally, sort of a direction we're looking to move in a little bit more is to do more qualitative research going forward, especially now with AI assistance sort of driving the cost of analysis down. Like it's just much easier to sort of do a thematic analysis of qualitative results in a way that was very time intensive before. So I think that's sort of a trend that we'll be moving toward, and I could kind of see that would be the case at other trade associations, especially where cost is always a concern. Just trying to do things more cost effective. The other sort of big transition that we've made on the economic research side of things, so this is maybe not quite the same as the market research, but we've transitioned away from using survey research for the more economic research that we do, and have really transitioned our economic research to rely on big data sets. So actual transaction data or credit card data or things like that, where it's actually, real data that exists in the market instead of sort of consumer self-reported data. And so I think sort of as more data sets like that become available for researchers, that sort of there will be a trend to sort of move a little bit away from survey research, especially when you're kind of doing an economic analysis like that.
Okay. Any final points before we close?
Oh, I don't think I have anything else.
Nice. Well, it's been a very interesting discussion, and I thank you so much for taking the time to share your views and perspectives with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a fun chat.
You're welcome. And for those that have liked what you've heard today, feel free to subscribe to the podcast, share it with someone else that might find it interesting as well, and leave a review too so others can find it also. So thank you for listening to Now That's Significant.